Hello, I'm Wes, the Hobby Hermit, and today's video is kind of a big one. I'm going to be covering a lot of topics. I went kind of full try hard on this mini. I tried out a lot of different techniques, really pushed myself. I kind of made a lot of goals and a very ambitious project for me with this miniature. And we achieved and didn't achieve all of the things I set out to do with this miniature. I think that there's a lot to learn from my efforts painting this miniature, and I really hope that you are able to learn something from me today because I know I learned a lot painting this miniature. So, without further ado, let's jump into this behemoth of a project that I put on myself. Now, my personal painting projects and history and how most of the projects I usually go with tend to fall in the realm of kind of creating tabletop standard miniatures, you know, making cool miniatures for my D&D games or like Warhammer or board game, any type of tabletop game. And so painting display miniatures is not really something I've ever done, nor do I plan on doing a ton more of in the future, but I wanted to try and paint something to kind of quote unquote the highest quality I was capable of. I had never kind of put this on myself before. I didn't even really know what that meant to do. And so I really wanted to push myself with this miniature and try and paint to the best of my abilities because up to this point, I really only ever painted, within a pretty strict time constraint or to just a very minimal standard because I wanted to get things for ready to play in a game. And that's probably what I'll continue to do. And kind of the overall goal of this channel is to try and teach myself easier methods to achieve tabletop ready miniatures. But I think there was a lot to learn from putting this type of ambitious project together and pushing myself on a bunch of different techniques. And I know that I'll be able to use some of the things I utilized, learned, and practiced on this miniature in future paint jobs in maybe a more dumbed down way. The miniature I chose today is actually from Miniac. He is, one of the largest miniature painting YouTubers on this platform. If you've somehow heard of me and not him, you should definitely go check him out. Um, but this is one of the minis from his Kickstarter, and when I saw it, I really wanted to support him. I like him as a creator, and so I thought this would be a great chance to paint a display miniature because it's a really cool miniature. It's kind of different from other elf miniatures. It's a little more scary, kind of and nasty, and not the traditional elegant elf, but a little bit more gritty. And I liked that. And so I had the idea of painting a kind of quote unquote swamp elf, so kind of more of an evil wood elf in a sense. And so that was kind of my overall concept for this miniature going into it. Kind of an evil wood elf, or is what I call it, a swamp elf. Now, this miniature is at 75 millimeter scale, so all the features on it are much bigger, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Obviously, it's a lot easier to get to all those tiny places, but then I would say mistakes stand out a lot more on miniatures of this scale. Something I noticed as I painted on it is that if I didn't smooth my paints or if I put on something a little too thick, it definitely showed a lot more than maybe it would on a 32 millimeter or 28 millimeter scale miniature. The first thing I did on painting this miniature was the skin tone. One of my main goals for this miniature was to paint a kind of quote unquote realistic skin tone. Now, I don't know if I per se accomplished a realistic skin tone, but overall, I'm pretty happy with my effort, and I felt like it got better the more I did it. So I kind of started on his kind of pec region. I don't know my muscular anatomy. But I started kind of like on his chest area, and I definitely put the paint on too thick at first, and it can kind of show it looks a little textured and not as smooth. And that's something I definitely did later on in the skin was I smoothed it out a lot more. I made it a lot more thin and did a lot more thin layers. So I would say when painting a kind of realistic skin tone, the first thing to note is to really thin down your paints. I started with Bugman's Glow for my base coat on the skin. I think it's just a really good base coat for a Caucasian skin tone, and it's pretty much what I've been using from here on out for any other paint jobs when it comes to painting a Caucasian skin tone. So I really like Bugman's Glow. And from there on out, I really kept it pretty simple. I just lightened Bugman's Glow with Kislev Flesh and just kind of continually put on layers and layers, just lightening it and more as I go. So I kept it pretty simple, the skin tone, and I think overall it benefited me the most. I definitely was a little thick in some parts, and you can kind of see it. It's just not as smooth in some areas. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the abdomen area. I think it looks pretty good for my first try, and then I think the back looks pretty good too. The hands are a little hit or miss. It's a little harder to paint the hands almost, um, just because they don't have as clear definition of like muscular areas that you can create highlights on and create easy shadows and stuff. So the hands are maybe kind of a C, but overall I'm pretty happy with his abdomen and the back area for my skin tone. So kind of things to note here is make it thin, thinner than you think it needs to be, because I thought I had my paints thin enough and then I didn't, and I'm like, whoa, no, this is way too thick. So number one rule for the skin tone is to keep it thin, and I would keep your paints pretty simple. I wouldn't go with a ton of different colors. I liked that I kept it pretty simple with just Bugman's Glow and Kislev Flesh. I wanted to touch on the face kind of separately because honestly it looks pretty janky, and overall it's one of the kind of more disappointing factors of this miniature for me. I overworked it. I put on too many layers. It got thick, it got gunky, it got some texture on it, and overall I'm just not super pleased with it. The eyes too also gave me some trouble. The eyes were almost, they were too small, and the fact that it was hard to get a like good detailed eye on it, but then they also weren't big enough, I felt like, to put a detailed eye on it. So it was just weird middle ground, and I just didn't know how to paint the eyes on them. And I tried like 5 times trying to paint the eyes on these, and overall the effect I got was kind of meh. They look like weird Sith eyes, I guess, if you're familiar with Star Wars. So the face overall in this is kind of a big L for me, but oh well. I'm gonna have to probably watch some more videos on painting faces specifically, and kind of I'll probably visit a kind of a miniature down the road on how to paint faces more specifically. And overall, I think that's going to be a recurring theme throughout this video, is that there were a lot of different techniques and stuff that I would like to explore in a more dedicated aspect. So the next part of the miniature that I painted was kind of the lower half of him, so the pants and the kind of like leather skirt thing he's got going on. Another effect that I specifically wanted to try on this miniature was this kind of textured effect on the leather. So I did a bunch of stippling, and this is actually the proper use of the term this time, of actually just making a ton of different dots, but utilizing it in kind of a highlighter method. So I used a kind of dark, I base coated in all like a dark brown, and then I went with a slightly lighter brown, and I stippled all across a huge area, and then I just progressively lightened that tone and stippled in a less and less and less area to kind of create this kind of textured effect that looked like it'd been kind of beaten, worn, or like it had been beaten, worn, soaked in water and mud and stuff, and kind of just gave it a much more different effect, made it stand out on the miniature. And overall, I think it's kind of a cool effect. I think it would be a great and easy effect to add to future miniatures that have maybe leather or cloth or something of that sort, that I think you create a cool, simple effect on. So overall, I think that was a win for us, and I'll be using that in the future for sure. Another major goal on this miniature for me was to try and paint non-metallic metal. Now, I, up to this point, had never tried or made any attempt to paint non-metallic metal. And if you know anything about this hobby, it's kind of a mainstay of high-end display miniatures. And so that was something I really wanted to try and accomplish on this miniature, was to try and do a non-metallic metal effect. I watched like a bajillion videos from Vinci V and Zumikito Miniatures, and Miniac again, and Squidmar, and all the big mainstay kind of YouTubers for it, and looked on Instagram and read online an article and stuff. I consumed so much content about how to paint non-metallic metal, and I probably overcomplicated it for myself and got too in my head about it. But I found it to be extremely frustrating. I was very disappointed with my effort into it. It didn't look good. It just looked weird. Once again, I think maybe my paints were definitely too thick. I didn't go thin enough. I think I got too in my head about it. I got really frustrated by it. Maybe that's silly because it's just a little army men that were painting, but this was a big goal of mine and something I wanted to accomplish. So why I am overall disappointed with my non-metallic metal attempt, I'm not going to give up. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an entire video dedicated to painting a sword in non-metallic metal. Like I'm just going to dedicate the entire video time worth to painting one non-metallic metal sword because I did a lot with this miniature. I spent a lot of time on it trying to do a ton of different new things, and I think it was just too much, and I probably just didn't give myself enough time to really make a solid effort at everything. So unfortunately, non-metallic metal, because I was so intimidated by it, fell by the wayside compared to some of the other techniques I tried, and ultimately I failed at doing it, and I'm very frustrated by that. And so it sucks. Like I'll be honest with you, I was really disappointed that I didn't accomplish that on this miniature. It was one of my major goals to accomplish on it, and so to not do that really sucks, honestly. So but I think it's a good lesson for all of you guys to push yourself, try new things. And you might not make it, you might not accomplish all of those miniatures, but what's awesome is that we have about a billion other miniatures probably sitting in our closet that we can try and paint. And worst case scenario, strip it, paint over it, like try again. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be making another attempt at non-metallic metal. I'm not going to give up. I will accomplish it. This is my life's goal now at this point, is to successfully paint something in non-metallic metal. So maybe to help you in avoiding my mistake is to just be really, really, really patient with it. I think I was rushing it in points. I was getting frustrated with it, and thin your paints more than anything. Overall, that'll be like my overall learning goal from this whole video, is thin your paints more than you think you need to, because I thought my paints were thin enough at certain points, and I went to put on the miniature and I'm like, oh, that's way too thick. So thin them more than you think you should. Get little cups and really measure out your drops of water to your paint pot, kind of paint drip ratio. That helps a lot, because doing it on the palette can seem like you're doing enough when in reality you're not. So thin more than you think you need to. That would be kind of my ultimate life lessons when it comes to NMM and overall all these different techniques. So since I failed miserably at the non-metallic metal, you may be asking, well, what did I do for the metal parts of this miniature then? Well, I didn't just leave them blank or just leave them looking crappy. I wanted to still try and do something else. So what I did is I painted them in true metallic metal, and I utilized an oil wash over them. I had never used an oil wash before, so I thought, well, since I'm not getting to do that technique, maybe I can try this other technique. So I utilized a black oil wash, just thinned it down with odorless thinner, slapped it over all the metal parts, waited about 10 or so minutes, and then took a Q-tip with odorless thinner and swiped all the edges. And I probably let it sit a little too long. I probably wouldn't go 10 minutes, probably 6 or 7 minutes is probably the sweet point, I would say. I was able to kind of, clean up all the edges, and it definitely gave it a cool, gritty look. I think I actually was really impressed by the shininess it gave off in the parts you cleaned it off compared to the really gritty, oily feel it fell in all the cracks and crevices. So overall, I was actually really happy with that effect, and it was very easy to accomplish. But I was still disappointed that it wasn't non-metallic metal. But I think going forward for my Chaos Space Marine army with all their banding and crap like that, and especially like the big models like the Forge Fiends, Mauler Fiends, I think that this is going to be probably the method I'm going to use for those parts. So that was exciting to kind of learn and experiment with, and I encourage you to do it as well. As it's really easy, honestly, but be careful when you're stirring it. It is easily splashable, if that's a word, so be careful with that. So painting the base in a kind of engaging, cool, and kind of immersive way was another one of my major goals for this miniature. Bases are definitely a weak spot for me on my miniatures. I tend to be really lazy with them. And so for this miniature, I really wanted to go all out and make it pretty cool, immersive, and engaging. So for this, I utilized stippling once again, except in kind of a different way. I got a kind of larger brush and kind of did a large dark green stipple over the majority of it, and then as I lightened in color, I stippled less and less of the miniature. After I brought it up to a brightness I was happy with, probably about four or so coats of lightning, I took a very tiny detail brush, dipped it ever so slightly in my brightest green, and kind of just dotted it over certain parts of the miniature. It gave it a very cool mossy effect, and it had a good brightness to make it stand out enough to make the base look realistic, but to not to overshadow the rest of the miniature. So I was really happy with that. Another thing I did was add a little fake grass tuft. I've been sitting on a like sleeve of these for a long time, so I wanted to use one. And a tip that I got from a couple different YouTube videos. I can't remember specifically which ones, multiple have talked about it, but Ninjon comes to mind. Talked about like painting the kind of grass tuft, not just slapping it on there and leaving it be. So I kind of paint it with a slightly darker green that I wanted, and then I put little orange on top to kind of make it look like kind of a weed, like a wildflower type of thing. And it looks really awesome. I'm really happy with that, and I think it turned out really well. Another major part of this was the water on the miniature, and this is something that I was intimidated by as well, but I had a plan. I was going to look at reference images of how other people painted water, and then I was going to slap gloss varnish over top to really give it that shine. Is this cheating? No, I don't think so. I think varnishes are cool and underutilized, and probably not talked about enough in miniature painting, at least in the videos I've watched. So I was actually really happy with my water. I thought it turned out really cool. I painted probably 90% of the water area in a very dark ocean blue. And then I took to the outer edges with a slightly lighter blue, and then went to kind of like a Fenrisian gray and did all the outer edges. And then I slapped the gloss varnish over top. Let it dry. And then I did pure white on just the very outmost edges, and then put another coat of gloss varnish over it. And I think while it doesn't look like perfect water or anything like that, I think it's definitely distinguishable as water. And overall, it was really easy to do. And I think it makes a really cool, engaging aspect on the miniature. Like, you look at it, you know it's water. It has this kind of motion to it with the ripple and everything. And I think it looks really cool. It definitely makes the miniature look better, and something on it I'm really proud of, and something I'll be utilizing in miniatures moving forward, because overall it was a fairly straightforward effect to accomplish. So I've covered and talked about a lot of different techniques and processes and aspects to this miniature. I hope that you have been encouraged to try something new, and I hope that you've learned something from some of the things I've explored in this video. I know I covered a lot. I'll be most likely releasing some shorts of all the more specific aspects of it. So if there's a specific technique you want to see more of, or see specifically on repeat, you can check out those. Overall, I really just wanted to push myself on this miniature, try new things, and really challenge myself. And I did exactly that. I got really frustrated with this miniature a lot of times, but overall, I think it looks cool. I learned a ton. I have a ton more things I want to try. And overall, I think I'm a much better miniature painter because of it. So I encourage you, if you have never done it, or if you've only ever painted kind of tabletop standard miniatures, to give it a go. It doesn't even have to be a 75mm miniature. Get a 32mm miniature and just try your hardest. Try some new effects. Try to create some of those crazy effects high-end Golden Demon painters utilize. It may not come out perfect. It may not look like that, but I guarantee you'll learn something new, and you'll be happy that you did it, and you'll be able to take that into your next miniatures, even if it's in a lesson form. But it may, add another level to your miniatures to make them look a step above on the tabletop. So I encourage you greatly to try and paint a miniature at this level, and to try and utilize new techniques that really push you and challenge you and frustrate you, because overall I think it makes you a better miniature painter, because I know it made me one. If you made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate the support. The channel is doing awesome. It's all thanks to you guys, so I really appreciate it. Keep it up. If you like my content, make sure to subscribe to see when I come out with new videos. Also, like this video, comment down below, all that good stuff. Tell me something that you learned from this miniature, or maybe tell me, what's a technique that you're interested in learning that, you think will challenge you. And if I haven't done it myself or tried it myself, I'll try it out too and see how it can challenge me. This is all about, us learning together, because I'm not the greatest miniature painter in the world. I would say I'm okay, I'm decent. I like to think I am, at least. But I'm really trying to learn new techniques, and I want you to learn with me. So, let me know what techniques you're interested in learning. So I really appreciate that. So, of course, don't forget to do all those things to help support the channel. Check out all my social media. I post there semi-frequently. If you're interested in picking up, some physical miniatures for in the fantasy variety, you can check out my Etsy shop below. Sell a bunch on there. I've been doing really well there. So if that's something you're interested in, check it out. And of course, you can check out my Twitch stream. I'm live every Thursday at 9 p.m. Central. Most of the time, I'm painting miniatures that will be used in videos like this like this miniature in this video, actually. So if that's something you're interested in, check it out. I play games here and then when I need a break from painting minis, but overall, I think it'll be a fun atmosphere. You can come check it out, come chat. It'd be a good time. So every Thursday at 9 p.m. Central, I really appreciate if you come check it out. So, of course, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And as always, elevate your game night.